The chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Free of legislative micromanaging, the Financial Product Safety Commission could develop nuanced regulatory responses. Some terms might be banned altogether, while others might be permitted only with clear disclosure. So you don't support legislative micromanaging. What about legislative macromanaging?
I'm sorry, Congressman. I don't.
It's a quote from an article you wrote, free of legislative micromanaging. So my question to you is, what is legislative micromanaging? Because to me, it's a euphemism for oversight.
I'm sorry, Congressman. I may have written it, but I'm not sure what the context is. Was it an article?
It is. The context is. It's in the Democracy Journal.
All right.
And it is the first public notion that we have of an agency similar to the one that you are going to head in a week. And you wrote an article about.
Yes.
And you said free of legislative micromanaging, the Financial Product Safety Commission could develop nuanced regulatory responses. Some terms might be banned. My question to you is, to some of us, legislative micromanaging is a euphemism for oversight.
Actually, I think this goes to the point that Congressman McHenry raised, and that was the question you may recall. We're trying to figure out how to combine the TILA and RESPA forms, complicated, hard to read, high regulatory compliance cost for the bank, or at least higher, very little value for the consumers. For more than 15 years, the various regulatory agencies have been negotiating to try to bring those together. And as Congressman McHenry said, there have been multiple attempts from Congress trying to do it.
Ms. Warren, my question is actually more general than that. My question is, what is the role for congressional oversight? You don't like legislative micromanaging. You wrote that.
No.
Some of us think that that's oversight. So do you concede that Congress has the authority and should have the authority to, for instance, hypothetically, set the budget for your agency? Is that legislative micromanaging or is that oversight?
Congressman, I was trying to respond to your question, and what I was trying to point out is that it was an example of how difficult it is for Congress to get an appropriate, nuanced response to a specific problem. And in this case, it was combining two forms. That what we've been able to do at the consumer agency, because agencies operate differently, is that we've had banks in, community banks, credit unions. We've been able to put out multiple iterations of the forms. We've been able to adjust. We've been able to consult with groups in ways that is not possible in the legislative process.
Would the gentleman yield for
Yes.
a moment?
Yes.
I think Mr. Gowdy is very happy you doing what you're doing. I think what he's really asking is, does Congress have a right to look over your shoulder? And did that statement indicate that you think that Congress not looking over your shoulder, second-guessing your funding or, in fact, your actions? That's, I think, the question, and I haven't heard an answer.
I'm sorry, Congressman. Let me give as straightforward an answer as I could. My direct testimony this morning is, of course, we need to be responsible to the Congress. The Congress should look over our shoulder 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I was trying to explain once I understood where the passage came from, I was just trying to explain what I thought that passage meant. But
well, may the record reflect that your article did not go into the detail that your answer this morning went into on that nuanced point. And so I'll ask a less nuanced question.
Yes, sir.
What about congressional involvement in your budget? Is that micromanaging or is that oversight?
Congressman, I think it is neither. I think that is a big policy and political decision. As you know, sir, not one banking regulator in the history of the United States has ever had its funding through the political process.
So you agree that Congress should not be responsible for setting the budget for your agency?
I believe that Congress should treat all of the banking regulators alike, and not say that the one that tries to watch out for consumers is going to be put through the political process and subject to lobbying by trillion-dollar financial
You did mention oversight in your opening statement, and the distinguished gentleman from Maryland, for whom I have great regard, used the term illegal 7 times. It's been used an additional 5 times since Mr. Cummings used it. Criminal and civil engagement with companies is also another form of oversight. If these practices are illegal, then why isn't Eric Holder sitting here with you explaining what he's done? Why do we need your agency if they're already illegal?
Well, Congressman, I think there's a real question about whether there's been adequate investigation into what financial
What have you
institutions-
done with respect to Attorney General Holder and the 90-plus United States attorneys, most of whom have been appointed by this administration? What have you done to cajole them to do their jobs? Because I've heard the word illegal, and that has a very specific meaning to me. If it's illegal, what have you done to cajole the prosecutors to do something about it?
Congressman, that's what we did when we got involved in mortgage settlement and were so sharply criticized for having advised the Department of Justice and our sister agencies as they are trying to work through holding responsible the parties
You
who
were
have violated
criticized
the
for
law.
referring people for criminal prosecution?
Congressman, we were criticized for trying to
By
help
whom? Not me.
Congressman McHenry. Congress.
I'm going to let
I
Congressman McHenry speak for himself. But as a former prosecutor, when I hear the term illegal, which I have heard 12 times this morning, I want to know why there aren't criminal prosecutions, why we need an agency and the Department of Justice can't do it.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman.
Gowdy of South Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Warren. The first question I'm going to ask you is directly from a constituent of mine in South Carolina,
Yes,
who is in the business of providing financial services. What steps will you take to ensure that complaints received by the Bureau are legitimate ones and not merely post-contractual gripes against a company when the consumer decides they don't want to live with the terms?
Well, Congressman, I'm glad you asked about the complaint system. It's one of the most significant features, I think, of the new consumer agency. And what we're planning to do with it is, instead of having sort of a general complaint line, we're really trying to develop more effective complaint resolution in the consumer agency on a product-by-product basis. So, for example, we'll be starting with credit cards. And what we're hoping to do is we're working on setting up a hotline and a form online for people who have had problems with their credit card issuers, and they believe perhaps that there have been violations of law and want to get in touch with the new consumer agency.
Will the complaints be made public? Because I think you'll agree with me that unfounded, unsubstantiated complaints have a deleterious effect on the accused.
So what we'll be doing, and I really want to give a shout out here to 5 of the largest credit card companies in the country who are working with us right now on a way that as soon as we receive a complaint, that complaint can go directly to the credit card companies. They can help us understand whether the complaint has merit. They have the opportunity to try to resolve it with the customer, keeping us in the loop on
Is that
what's
just
going.
for credit card companies, or is it for all financial service providers?
So here's what I want to make clear. As we build this...
I've only got 5 minutes. I'm not trying to cut you off, but there are other things I'd like to ask you.
Fair enough, sir. I'm just trying to give you a picture
Are
of
the
what we're
complaints
doing.
public? Well, let's try that with a yes and no answer.
Congressman, I've tried to describe the process for one product. We're trying to get this product right, and we've had a lot of cooperation from the credit card companies.
I'm probably not answering my question very artfully.
no.
Are the complaints public, yes or no?
Congressman, there is no single answer for all products in the same way.
Are any
We're
of the
working-
complaints public?
Congressman, we don't have any complaints yet. What we're trying to do is build a system to deal with
So you do
complaints.
have the discretion to keep the complaints non-public if you like.
What we're trying to do is work with the industry to find a complaint system that works for American families and works for those who are providing them services. We're in the middle of that process. This is part of Stand Up, and we are glad, Congressman, to hear from you, to hear from your constituents, and to hear from everyone else about this process. We're an open door on this subject.
Well, thank you. I will encourage them to participate. I want to ask you about some of the definitions. I saw in a definition for abusive. See if I can. Materially interferes with the ability of a consumer to understand a term of condition of a consumer financial product or service. That suggests to me that some interferences are immaterial. Is that what you meant by that?
Congressman, I believe the language you're quoting is out of the Dodd-Frank Act, and it's Congress's intention. Not, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have a copy of it with me here.
Will you not be the one enforcing that?
Congressman,
will you set regulations that define these terms?
Congressman, this is the guidance that Congress has given.
I'm asking you, are some interferences immaterial?
Congressman, we will go through the process of interpreting the language that Congress has given us.
I don't mean for that to be a trick question. Are some interferences immaterial? Because the word material modifies interference.
Congressman, I want to be clear about this. It's statutory language that you're asking. There's a process in place for the Consumer Bureau. You don't want me standing here shooting from the hip about how I might want to interpret individual language.
Well, let me ask you about the second one. It also defines it as an unreasonable advantage or taking unreasonable advantage of a consumer's lack of understanding. Are there some instances where taking advantage of a consumer's lack of understanding are reasonable?
Congressman, this is the language that Congress has adopted in the Dodd-Frank Act. Ultimately, it will fall to this Bureau through a lengthy process to interpret this on a case-by-case basis. I believe it would be irresponsible for me to stand here and pop off about how I would interpret particular words.
Do you believe that there's a duty to educate or a duty to learn on behalf of the consumer?
I believe that consumers want to learn. I think they want to know.
Well, that's a different
products
question.
are.
I didn't ask whether or not they wanted to. Do you believe that there's a duty to do it since the law itself says consumers' inability to protect his own interests? Do you agree that there's a duty to educate yourself?
Congressman, we have, as part of our responsibility under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau laws, undertaking consumer financial education. And I embrace this. I think it is exactly where this agency should be.
Is that a yes?
We are going to help consumers by giving them products where prices are clear, where risks are clear, where they can make comparisons.
Is there a duty to educate yourself, yes or no?
I believe that an empowered consumer is a consumer who can not only protect himself or herself, but one who can change the market.